Rancangan Undang-Undang Penghapusan Kekerasan Seksual, or shortly known as RUU PKS. For us Indonesians, this very bill will help prevent and protect those who have been sexually assaulted or harassed. Since 2016, the RUU PKS has been identified to be a top priority of Prologenas, which is Indonesia's national legislation program. However, in 2020, the RUU PKS was removed from the program's top priority list, and this led to the outrage coming from a large number of individuals across Indonesia.
Siapa yang pernah menjadi korban kekerasan seksual di sini? Ada desakan RUU PKS sekarang juga.
Anda ini dibayar dengan uang rakyat untuk mendengar aspirasi rakyat. Hampir semua perempuan pernah mengalami kekerasan seksual, entah itu pelecehan seksual atau bentuk-bentuk kekerasan yang lain. Jadi ini suara korban, ini suara rakyat.
Even though there's this divide between those that agree with the passing of the bill and those who don't, there's still a lot of questions when it comes to Indonesia and sexual violence. In an example scenario, word gets around that someone in our community had been sexually assaulted. Perhaps one would question, when will those abusers be fairly held accountable for their actions? Or perhaps this perpetrator has been innocent all this time and was in fact framed for sexually assaulting someone. Shouldn't we, as young people, or in other words, the future generation of Indonesia, be more vocal about sexual violence that exists in our country? Is it wrong to be verbal about a human rights issue like this? And yes, despite Indonesia's patriarchal society being seen as something common, is it necessary to put sexual assault and its effects within a taboo area? Why is this bill considered to be too deep of a topic to be talked about?
These are just a portion of the many questions that are circling in people's minds. And at this point, it's impossible to simply make a solution which will satisfy everyone.
I think at the end of the day, what we most want as a society is to improve Indonesia, our homeland. But how can that be possible if we simply can't communicate to each other as respectively despite our different views? Because on one hand, many are demanding for the passing of the bill, but there are also many who would prefer this bill not to be passed. When we look at the bigger picture and ask ourselves, if this bill were to be passed, how can we be sure that this won't be a clear way for the rise of fraud sexual violence cases to take place?
Because let's be real, anyone can be manipulative. This video will delve deep into both sides of the RUU PKS controversy, as we feel understanding both perspectives will not only give us, but you as well, a better way of analyzing the situation. And it's okay to have your own beliefs, as at the end of the day, we can't change who you are, but we are asking for you to simply sit back and listen. So, why should the bill be passed?
Exhibit A, the increase in numbers of sexual abuse within Indonesia. According to Komnas Perempuan, in the first 7 months of 2020, there have been a total of 3,020 cases of abuse, 432 of them being cases directed towards women. Meanwhile, there have been around 2,000 to 4,000 total cases of abuse directed towards minors and or children, where 55% of the statistic were cases of sexual assault. As said by the Ministry of Women's Empowerment and Child Protection, the issue of sexual violence is like the iceberg phenomenon, where the many problems that occur are actually more complex and bigger than how it may appear on the surface. From this, it is evident that what lies underneath is far worse than what we can expect. Perhaps worse than what numbers can independently explain.
The RUU PKS bill delves into these 9 types of sexual violence: harassment, sexual exploitation, forced contraception, forced abortion, rape, forced marriage, forced prostitution, sex trafficking, and sexual torture. And it will be through this very bill that a new paradigm in society will begin to bloom to ensure that we not only as a community but as a country be free from sexual violence. However, it is also important to note that it can't be denied that the Indonesian patriarchal culture sees sexual violence within a society, especially between the male and female sex, as something quite common, as there is this approach that when, for example, you and your partner are a married couple and consent isn't that big of a deal because this is a lifelong commitment you have agreed to take on. So this concept of men being placed in a higher ground than women is seen nowhere near as a threat. Perhaps some of you who are watching may be wondering, why on earth should this patriarchal system still exist? And the answer is, sometimes systems like these are very much integrated for some Indonesian families, and surprisingly they don't find anything wrong with that, assuming that some of these individuals or families have been living pretty good lives. So when a party of people are suddenly attacking a system that these individuals have lived by for their whole lives, it would be understandable that it be seen as a threat. But it's also important to realize that sexual violence can happen anywhere, no matter what society, religion, skin color, or really anything for that matter. The ugly truth is sometimes we may never know who the predator is, and that when these cases do occur, it is proven that a large percentage of both men, women, or whatever gender you identify yourself with, having to deal with the traumatic effects of abuse. In the book Women, Business, and the Law 2018, out of the 11 countries within Southeast Asia, Indonesia is the only country who holds no such regulations focusing on sexual violence. So, if the RUU PKS bill were to be passed, these victims will have the opportunity they deserve to heal physically and most importantly mentally, as according to Article 27 of the bill, it states how said victims' recovery will be monitored and examined on an ongoing basis, as well as being provided of community support assistance. Second, these victims will get legal protection from threats, reoccurrence of violence, and protection of anonymity. And lastly, health as medical examinations, treatments, and facilities will be provided in accordance to the needs of these victims. So even after all of that, opposition towards this very bill still exists within their own separate reasons.
A petition on change.org was created by Maimun Herawati, a lecturer in Indonesia's Pajajaran University. She considers that the RUU PKS legalized free sex due to the lack of sexual assault regulations, as sexual intercourse violates some social and religious norms. She first claims that the RUU PKS isn't comprehensive enough, as it doesn't contain regulation aimed towards the norms of sexual behavior, since we, as individuals, should also realize the importance of prohibiting so-called sexual crimes, such as committing adultery, prostitution, or homosexuality. Secondly, the bill regulates the prohibition of forcing an individual towards undergoing abortion or prostitution, implying prostitution as some deviant sexual behavior. An important factor to support Herawati's perspective is to put into consideration Indonesia's so-called typical family life that lives with conventional values, therefore making religion as the basis of life, where said religion adhered by these families and to the larger portion of the Indonesian society criticizing sexual behavior. According to Herawati, if the RUU PKS bill were to be passed, the UU Perkawinan or the marriage laws in Indonesia, which regulates the concept of the man being the head of the family, won't be as prioritized, and to the number of people, this will be a significant problem.
Therefore, in Herawati's eyes, it's either we should wholly reject this bill or convert it to instead only eliminate sexual violence.
So there you have it, two opposing sides to the RUU PKS controversy. And whilst many of the prior mentioned facts and opinions having been stated, yes, statistics were provided, but how it can be proven that these numbers truly reflect the reality of sexual violence in Indonesia? How can we make sure that the data is also valid and not a form of playing victim?
To gain a deeper insight at this study, we gathered 10 different individuals who have kindly agreed to speak up about their own experiences of being sexually harassed.